all of us have this one thing in common, and that is we all love a good story. For some of you, it might be reading a book. For others, it might be watching a movie. Maybe it's a documentary or fiction. It doesn't matter. For some others of you, Janine Rule, wherever you are, it might be K-drama. For my wife, it might be that as well. You might stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning because you love a good story. We all love a good story. I remember when my dad was still alive, he used to tell us these amazing stories about his life. How his father, that is my grandfather, my grandfather was killed by pirates in the ocean. See, my grandfather worked as I don't know what he does, but he delivers this stuff in a boat, from one place to another. And one day he went sailing and he never returned. He never came back. And the suspicion was that he was killed by pirates. And because of that, my dad had to drop out of school in order to work to support his younger siblings and also his mom. It was an amazing story. One of the amazing stories that he told us, it was a story of resilience. It was a story of, being tough and all that. It's just so good. We all love a good story. So that's the one thing we have in common. But there's this one thing that we don't often realize. And that one thing is this, that we are actually writing our story right now. That's right. All of you and I are writing the story of our lives right now as we speak. But guess what? We don't think of our lives that way. We don't think of our life as a story that we are writing. You know why? Because as it's happening, right, we don't call it a story. Am I right? As our life is happening, you call it whatever you want. You call it a current event or whatever. But do you know that once this current event in your life is in the past, we change the definition. Now that current event becomes a story. Am I right? This is a story that you will tell. If you don't believe me, if someone comes to you and someone asks you about yourself, where you're from, where you go to school, and how you met and all that, what would you do? You will tell a story. That's right. And everything that happened in the past becomes a story for us. But guess what? Everything that happens right now in the future will become part of your story. So we are writing a story right now. The question is it going to be an embarrassing story? Or is it going to be a great story that we can't wait to tell others? Is it going to be a story that we will skip because we're not proud to tell it? You see, your decision that you make as the story unfolds actually is the key as to what kind of story you will tell. But more on that a bit later. We are actually right now on the third part of our sermon series that we call Good Call, all right? And the idea behind this series is that we want to see the relationship between good questions and good decisions. There's actually a strong relationship, that good questions lead to good decisions. A lot of the decisions that you make, think about it. A lot of your past decisions that you have made, isn't it true that some of your worst decisions you made because you did not ask good questions? All right? You made those decisions maybe based on your emotion, maybe based on the pressure at the time. But there is this strong relationship between good questions that lead to good decisions. Okay? I love this image that I found on the internet. It's not spiritual attack. You just make bad choices in life. How many of you agree with that signage, right? I mean, sometimes it is spiritual attack, but let me tell you, most of the time, all the stuff that's happening to you right now, maybe, most likely, they are the results of some of the bad choices, some of the bad decisions that you make in the past. Because whatever you decide will become a permanent part of your life. All right? So in this series, we want to help you. We want to give you a handle so that you can make better decisions that will lead to fewer regrets in your life. All right? And the handle is very simple. I want you, every single time you want to make any decision of importance, I want you to imagine, okay? Imagine you're holding an imaginary remote control. All right? And this imaginary remote control has a big, fat pause button. So before you make that decision, why don't you grab this imaginary remote control, press that big, fat pause button, and do these three things. Number one, ask good questions. Number two, answer them honestly. And number three, you act on those honest answers that you just gave. All right? I guarantee you, if you do this, you will make better decisions that will lead to fewer regrets. And as a result, you will be better at life. Your life will be better. Not only that, but the lives of the people around you will be better. People who look up to you, people who depend on you, their lives will be better if you make better decisions that will lead to fewer regrets. How do we know this? We know this because every decision that you make, all right, it's not only impacting you. We are not the only people impacted by our decisions. In fact, I'll say this in a negative way. We are not the only people impacted by our regrets as well. Isn't it true that you are who you are today as a result of some of the things that your parents did, right? Some of you are the beneficiaries of some of the great decisions that your parents made in the past. The decisions to stay together, for example. The decisions to save up, to set you up for life. You are the beneficiaries of some of the great decisions that your parents made in the past. But unfortunately, some of you are the quote-unquote victims of some of the bad decisions that your parents made in the past. So that's why it's important for us, before we make any decision of importance, to not just make that decision on a hunch, but to actually grab this imaginary remote control, press that big fat pause button, and ask yourself, hey, am I asking good questions here? Am I answering them honestly? Am I acting on them, right? Last week, Alistair did an amazing thing with the first question. And the first question that we want to teach you is this: am I being honest with myself really? All right? Before you make that important decision, ask this question. And I'm telling you, this is, I'm kind of ashamed to share this, but I need to, because I want you to learn from my mistake, all right? A few years ago, I had an investment opportunity. And I did not ask the integrity question. I fooled myself. I did. And we're really good at that, right? You know, when you try so hard to sell yourself on an idea, most likely it's a bad decision. So I was trying so hard to sell myself on the idea of why I should make this investment. And I didn't ask the integrity question. I wasn't honest with myself. In fact, I fooled myself. I said, hey, if this investment makes me money, I'm going to give more to church. See, I used church as an excuse for bad decisions that I was about to make. And guess what? True enough, because I didn't do my research, I didn't ask other people, I didn't seek wise counsel, I didn't ask the honest question, I was actually greedy. Bottom line was, I want to make money, right? I was greedy, and I wasn't being honest with myself. So, I want to encourage you, learn from my mistake. Before you make that purchase, before you enter into that relationship, before you make that business deal, right? Stop and ask yourself, am I being honest with myself really, right? I'm not saying he's not the one. I'm not saying that's not a good investment. But stop and ask yourself, am I being honest with myself really, all right? Why do I want to buy that thing? Why do I want to go out with her? Why do I want to make that business deal? Ask yourself, and ask the follow-up question. Am I being honest with my answer? And then, after you go through this set of questions, you will make better decisions and have fewer regrets. That's question number one. Today, we want to teach you the second question, and that is the legacy question. And the question is very, very simple. What story do you want to tell? What story do you want to tell? Before you make an important decision, before you make that business deal, before you go out with that person, ask yourself, what story do I want to tell? When the decision that I'm about to make will become nothing but a story in the future, what story do I want to tell? Because you're creating your life story one decision at a time, right? Depending on how you decide, it will change the trajectory of your story. So be careful with the decision that you make. Ask yourself, what story do I want to tell? Will I be proud of this story, or will I be ashamed of this story? Will I skip this story when I tell that part of my life, or can I wait to just share it with others because that story is so good for me to share? So ask yourself, what story do I want to tell? All right? Your boss asks you to lie to your customer, and you don't want to get fired by your boss, so you say yes, so you lie to that customer. That customer finds out and calls you on it, and your boss, he washes his hand, he puts the blame on you, and you lose your job. Is that the story you want to tell? Or how about this story? Your boss asks you to lie to your client, and you refuse to lie. You know the consequence. And true enough, because you don't obey your boss, you lose your job. Still, the final result is the same. But isn't that a better story? Isn't that the story you would rather tell someday to your children, to your grandchildren, that daddy, that grandfather was asked to lie and I refused to, and it was tough at first, but eventually I found another job? Wouldn't that be a better story for you to tell to your children, to your grandchildren? Now, the reason why this is so hard for us to do is because of this. We make decisions based on our emotions and sometimes because of the pressure at the time. We rarely make decisions based on the stories that we want to tell. Am I right? We choose, a lot of time, expediency. We choose the easy way out. We choose to not walk the difficult path. You're gonna miss a deadline, right? And then if you don't take a shortcut, you might lose your job. So what do? You take a shortcut because that's important. Who cares about the story I want to tell? I can't afford to lose my job right now, right? A lot of us make that kind of decisions in life based on the current situation at the time. We don't think about the story of our lives. You don't want to lose a job. That's understandable, right? Nobody wants to lose a job. But is that really the story that you want to tell? That you take shortcuts in life? I don't think so. Okay? How about this? Your marriage is in trouble. Your husband asks if you could go to counseling, both of you, and you refuse because you just hate him at the time. But there's someone at the office who also experienced the same struggle with his marriage. Suddenly you talk. Kindred spirit. He likes you. You like him. So what do? You divorce your husband. He divorces his wife. So now your kids have to go back and forth between two houses. Is that the story you want to tell? Or maybe that's your story. I'm not judging you, but I'm just saying that the decisions that we make, especially those decisions that we make on emotions, are really, really dangerous. All right? In fact, I will say this. A lot of people think that the emotion is the green light for them to make that decision. No, okay? When faced with a decision, a strong emotional appeal is not a green light. It's the opposite. It is a red flag, not a green light, all right? And salespeople, good salespeople know this, They will not let you walk out of their store without you buying something, especially car dealers. Sorry if you're a car dealer, a car salesman, right? They know, once you put your butt on that leather seat, once you smell that brand new car smell, right? Suddenly your senses are all gone. Your judgment is all clouded, right? You said, I gotta have this car. Once you touch that shiny new iPhone 14 Plus, Pro Max, Pro whatever, that's it. You're a goner. I gotta have this phone. My phone keeps dying on me, and it has this error. You try to sell yourself on the idea, right? Why? Because we're so good at that. We are good salesmen to ourselves, right? We make a lot of our decisions based on a strong emotional appeal, and when that happens, I'm telling you, it's a red flag. All right? that's when you need to take your old trusty imaginary remote control, press that pause button, and ask yourself, am I asking good questions here, right? Am I being honest with myself why I want that phone, why I want that relationship, why I want that job, why I want that business deal? Am I being honest with myself? And ask the second question, what story do I want to tell when this decision is all over? All right? That's very, very important. Now, in our Bible, there's this amazing story that can be an example for us how we can use this technique, all right? It's a story of Joseph. Some of you, if you grew up in church, you'd be familiar with this story. I'm not talking about Joseph, the husband of Mary. I'm talking about Joseph, the son of Jacob. You can find his story in the book of Genesis, okay? Let me just summarize to you what the story is all about. Joseph, at this time, is about 17 years old. The story happens in the year 1800 BC, before Christ. And Joseph is the 11th of the 12 sons of Jacob. All right? And in this story, Joseph finds himself in a situation not of his own choosing. What happened was, Joseph is Jacob's favorite son. And this makes his older brothers very, very envious of Joseph. So they decide to sell him as a slave. In fact, at the beginning, they decide to kill him, but they thought better, rather than killing him, it's better for us to sell him as a slave, because then we're going to have money. He's going to be gone anyway, which is what we want. And that's what they did. They decide to sell Joseph as a slave, and they lie to their father, telling him, hey, your favorite son, unfortunately, is killed by a wild animal. Now, I want to stop right there because it's important. Imagine that you are one of the 10 older brothers. Would that be a story that you'll be proud to tell your children and your grandchildren? Daddy was envious of my younger brother Joseph. So me, along with my 9 other brothers, we decided to beat him up and sold him as a slave, and we lied to our father, broke his heart to pieces, and he could never recover again for the rest of his life. That's what Daddy did. Would that be something that you would be proud to tell your children someday? I think it's a secret that these guys keep for the rest of their lives. All right? And another thing that makes the Joseph story very, very interesting, very, very appealing to all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not, but the story of Joseph is so universal, it's so appealing to everybody. You know why? Because Joseph did not choose his fate. You see, his life story was hijacked by his brothers. You know, he didn't ask to be sold as a slave in Egypt. His brothers decided that for him. That's why I want to tell you again, this is so important. If you didn't get anything from today, just get this. You are not the only people infected by your decision, okay? You are not the only person impacted by your decision. So be careful, think twice, press that pause button before you make that important decision, all right? So, anyways, back to Joseph. The brothers sold him as a slave to a slave trader. The slave trader brought him to Egypt, and in Egypt, Potiphar, a military general, he buys Joseph as a slave, puts him in his house, and gives him responsibility. And Joseph has a choice now. Do I act like other slaves and just do the bare minimum? Or do I make the best of my situation? No matter what life throws at me, I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to try my very, very best. You know what Joseph did choose to do? He chooses to do the second option. So he starts working so hard. He becomes a very trustworthy person, and Potiphar entrusts him with more and more stuff until he becomes the most trusted person in the whole household of Potiphar. Not just about his house, but all his business affairs. They're all trusted to this guy, this Hebrew slave named Joseph. Isn't that a wonderful story to tell? I was sold as a slave in Egypt. I could act like a victim. My brothers sold me. I was sold twice. I could act as a victim if I wanted to, but I chose to work hard. I chose to continue to trust God. Wouldn't that be a wonderful story to tell? So that's what happened to Joseph. But unfortunately for Joseph, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, his story doesn't end there. The wife of Potiphar takes an interest in Joseph. She wants Joseph to be her lover. She wants to sleep with Joseph. And again, Joseph is faced with a dilemma. He's faced with an option here, with two options, right? What do I do? What do I do? And here's what's amazing about this part of Joseph's story, and I want you to pay real close attention, all right? At this juncture of his story, Joseph actually employs the technique that we are talking about today, believe it or not, all right? He actually, and it's even more than what I tell you today, what Joseph did is truly, truly amazing. He actually recounts his story out loud. When I ask you to ask a good question and ask yourself, what story do I want to tell? I'm talking about asking yourself this question internally, not out loud. But this time, Joseph, as a context to the answer that he's about to give to Mrs. Potiphar, he actually recounts his story out loud. Right? I want to summarize his response to Mrs. Potiphar to you, and then in the second half of the response, we're going to read it straight from the text. This is what Joseph essentially says. Mrs. Potiphar, I came to this land as a slave. I had no hope, I had no future, and your husband bought me as a slave, and he entrusted me with stuff, and I worked so hard to earn his trust, and he entrusts me with more and more until I become the most important person in this household. In other words, my story is good. It's getting better and better. And this is how Joseph continues his story to Mrs. Potiphar. We're going to read it together from Genesis 39, verses 8 to 9. He says, with me in charge, he told her. See, he's still telling a story, right? He's still telling a story. With me in charge, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me. So everything has been really, really good. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. You know why, Mrs. Potiphar? Because you are his wife. Think about it, Mrs. Potiphar. Do you really want sleeping with a Hebrew slave as a part of your story? Do you really want that to be part of your story, the story that you will tell your children and grandchildren someday? I don't think so. So Joseph, take the wider context of his life, what has happened in the past and what will happen in the future, and he gave Mrs. Potiphar this powerful, powerful reason why he would not want to sleep with her. By the way, by this time, Joseph is about 19, 20 years old, and guess what? Not sleeping with Mrs. Potiphar is not a question of morality, it's a question of life and death. He was a slave. He had no choice. He had no option, right? But this is how he responded based on what has happened to him in the past and his projection of what's going to happen in the future. This is his powerful response to Mrs. Potiphar. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? In other words, Mrs. Potiphar, you tell me, do you think I want adultery to become a part of my life? Do you think I want indiscretion? Do you think I want betrayal to be a part of my life? How could I do such a wicked thing? How could I repay you the kindness of your husband like this? See, as far as Joseph is concerned, there are two options, there are two choices that he could make. Option number one, and this will create a totally different story of his life. Story number one, I was sold as a slave to Egypt. My master bought me and he was very, very kind to me. He entrusted me with things. I became the most trusted person in his household and I betrayed his trust by sleeping with his wife. That could be one story. Or story number two, I was sold as a slave to Egypt. My master bought me and he was very, very kind to me. He entrusted me with things. I became the most important person in his household. I was given the opportunity to betray him and I did not take it. I choose to continue to be loyal to him because he's been so kind to me, and I cannot dishonor him like that. I cannot do this wicked thing against my God who has protected me this far. That could be another story of Joseph. And you know what Joseph chose to do? Joseph decided on a story worth telling. And that's why we're reading his story right now. Right? My question to you before we go, what story do you want to tell? Some of you might be saying, oh, Daniel, this is all fine and good. I wish you had told me this 15 years ago. I made a lot of bad choices in life, a lot of bad decisions. Well, I'll tell you what, you're not done yet. You are still writing your story. When Joseph was sold as a slave to Egypt, when he was put in prison, by the way, he did choose not to sleep with Mrs. Potiphar. He was thrown in jail as a result. And then in jail, he continues to work hard. He's promoted to become the head of the prisoners. Again, he's given the wisdom to interpret Pharaoh's dream. He becomes the second most important person in Egypt to protect Egypt from famine. His brothers, who sold him as a slave, came back and begged for food from Joseph. They didn't know it was Joseph. Again, Joseph had a choice to make. Do I want bitterness to be a part of my story? Or do I want forgiveness to be a part of my story? Joseph, again, chooses wisely. He chooses forgiveness as part of his story. Let me tell you, you might be in the pit right now. You might be in the dungeon right now. You have made some wrong choices, bad choices in the past, but you are still writing your story. So make sure you write a story that you'll be proud to tell. Let me tell you, every single time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, you're choosing to write a good story. Every time you choose generosity versus holding everything to yourself, you're choosing to write a good story. Every single time you choose faithfulness over taking the easy way out, you're choosing to write a good story. Make sure you write a story that you'll be proud to tell others someday. Why don't you get up from your seat? We're going to end our gathering right here. Come back next week for the third question that we want to share with you. Invite your friends to come. I'm sure this will be beneficial for them as well. How many of you know that the Word of God can be super, super practical, right? There's no point arguing theology and all that like the Pharisees did during the time of Jesus. Jesus was super practical, while the Pharisees were busy arguing theology, arguing the law of Moses. What did Jesus say? Do not worry about anything. Give us today our daily bread. I'm going to tell you, the Word of God is super practical. Practical is good. Practical is godly. Practical is important for you to apply the Word of God to your life.